My name is Cecile. Just the other day, my elementary school-age daughter surprised me by asking, "Mom, can you teach me how to do makeup?" I'm 39. Girls these days seem so mature for their age. Now that I think about it, as a little girl, I was thrilled with inexpensive candies that came with pretty toy necklaces or lipsticks from capsule toy machines. It feels like just a moment ago I was changing her diapers, and now she's on her way to becoming a beautiful young lady. Oops, almost brought myself to tears. Today I'm going to talk about back when I was a bit more of a beauty myself. Please listen if you'd like. This was about 8 years ago. I had just finished a month-long stay at my parents' home in preparation for giving birth, and returned to the home where I lived with my husband Tommy, baby in arms. I thought we were starting our happy life as a family of 3, but it turned out to be a family of 4. Yes, for some reason, my mother-in-law Melinda, who was supposed to be at her own house, was there to greet me. I was told, "I thought my son wouldn't manage on his own, so I moved in to help." Well, maybe a man alone would struggle with daily life? Not being there, I thought, maybe that's just how it is, and thanked Melinda for taking care of my husband. She seemed quite pleased, saying, "I'm honored to have been of help." And as I entered the house, everything was neat and the air was clear. Perhaps it was good she lived with us. But then a problem arose. My overseas brand wedding ring, which I had to remove and store away because it no longer fit during pregnancy, was nowhere to be found. It was supposed to be in the bedroom drawer. Where's the ring? My overseas brand, where did it go? I searched everywhere, only to find something even stranger. My overseas brand bag was missing. The bag I had saved up for and bought with much effort before I was married. Wait a minute. Even the shoes from an overseas brand I splurged on as a birthday gift to myself were missing. Now the ring is one thing, but it's really strange for such large items to disappear. After all, I only use them on special occasions and hardly ever move them from their storage. Feeling something was off, I hurried back to the living room and asked Melinda, "Melinda, did you tidy up the bedroom closet?" "What's the rush? I haven't touched the bedroom," she replied. If Melinda didn't tidy up, then it must have been stolen, right? So have you noticed anything missing? Was there anything unusual while I was away? I asked. However, both my husband and Melinda, avoiding eye contact, denied anything was amiss. "Nothing happened, right, Mom?" "Yes, it was all normal." I told the two, who were speaking so strangely. "My wedding ring, brand name bag, and shoes are missing. My bedroom was burglarized." Melinda, surprised, asked, "Are you sure you looked everywhere?" In my panic, I could only nod at Melinda while frantically calling the police on my mobile phone. "Hello, is this the police? I've been burglarized. The situation and address?" What are you calling the police for?" Melinda shouted at me, clearly upset by the police's questions. Caught off guard by her scolding, I froze, staring blankly. The woman on the phone kept asking, "What's going on?" "Oh, sorry. You needed the situation and address, right?" While feeling Melinda's disgruntled gaze, I relayed the details to the police. In less than 10 minutes, 2 police officers arrived at our home. They wanted to see the room where the theft occurred. However, Melinda kept insisting, "It's a misunderstanding. Please leave." Even if it were a misunderstanding, things were indeed missing. Both supposed to be victims in the house, I went pale at the thought of strangers entering our home. While Melinda was red-faced, angrily saying, "We don't need the police." Even my husband was trying to calm me down, saying, "It's just a ring or 2, it's fine." "Just a ring or 2? That's our treasured ring we bought together. It's irreplaceable," I retorted, while the police officer watched me intently. "All right, ma'am. Could you please show me the room?"
Your husband and mother-in-law can stay in the living room. We'll talk to them."
With that, the older police officer asked the younger one to handle my husband and Melinda, while guiding me to the bedroom. Melinda was still furiously saying, "Don't just go looking around someone's house." After all, this house, though in my husband's name, is also my home. By that logic, Melinda could have been told the same thing about intruding in someone's house. Of course, Melinda didn't seem to realize that. Confused by their behavior, the older officer asked me,
"Have you been living with your mother-in-law all this time?"
"No, I went back to my parents' home for childbirth. I just returned today and found out Melinda had been living here while I was gone."
Did your husband ever discuss letting his mother stay here with you?"
"No, I didn't agree to that."
"I see. Before you went to your parents, were the missing items here?"
"They were. I don't have proof of the ring and bag, but I have a photo of the shoes. I was thinking of selling them secondhand. See, the save date on the data is exactly a month ago."
"Right, so it must have been lost after you went to your parents' house,"
the police officer said, narrowing his eyes as if piecing something together.
"Let's take a look at the room,"
he suggested. I led the officer to the bedroom and explained again where the missing items had been stored. While complying with the fingerprint collection, the officer asked,
"What's that?"
He pointed to a handkerchief on the shelf. Unfamiliar to me. It wasn't mine or my husband's. I thought, that shelf is where we keep our favorite photos and paintings, and my husband knows I always keep it tidy. I've never seen this handkerchief placed there. I don't know, I'm sorry, I didn't notice it until you mentioned it. It wasn't there before I went to my parents' house. Missing valuables, yet unfamiliar items appearing? If this isn't creepy, what is? Feeling frightened, the officer asked,
"May I check this a bit more?"
I answered, "Please do."
This has a camera hidden in it."
"What?" Surprised, I watched as the officer unfolded the handkerchief on his palm, revealing a small camera tucked inside. "For what? Espionage?"
Let's look around the room a bit more."
The officer, calm amidst my confusion, checked other drawers, different from where the missing items were stored.
"Ah, found it."
He pulled out a cable from a drawer near my husband's side of the bed. The cable fit the small camera he had found earlier.
"The mother's behavior is a bit suspicious, but the husband seems fishy too,"
the officer said with a wry smile. I was unable to grasp the situation and asked, "What do you mean?"
"Your husband might have installed this camera. We found a cable for playback,"
he explained. "What? For what purpose?"
I'd like to check the video. Can I use that computer?"
he asked, pointing to my husband's laptop. Confused yet hoping to uncover the truth, I agreed. "Sure, go ahead." The officer connected the camera to the laptop with practiced ease. The laptop seemed to recognize the camera, and a menu opened up. The officer selected some command and chose a random file from a folder. To our shock, the video displayed our bedroom. I went with the officer to the living room where my husband and Melinda were waiting. Melinda immediately complained. "Really now, you're making a fuss and calling the police. We had to undergo questioning. Felt like criminals. It's so upsetting." My husband, too, was in a foul mood.
"Making a big deal out of nothing."
"Enough. Whose fault is this?" In anger, I slammed my hand on the living room table. I'm still recovering from giving birth, and they made me run around and panic like this. I was seething. "How dare you act so brazenly after what you've done? I know everything now. Look at this." I took the laptop from the officer, opened the screen, and played the video we'd just seen. My husband and Melinda gasped.
Huh?
As they saw themselves on screen, rummaging through the bedroom shelves, taking my ring and bag and leaving. In the video, my husband was telling Melinda,
"With the money from selling these, we can both have some fun."
Melinda was laughing.
Who would have thought she had such sellable items? It's hard to prosecute family living together for theft, she said. Mom, you're amazing. So knowledgeable.
So shameless. Even when their misdeeds are pointed out, not only did they not feel guilty, but their conversation suggested they were proud of their cunning. I thought I was targeted because I happened to have brand name items, but who would have guessed the culprits were inside the house? My agitation and anger grew. While my husband looked scared, Melinda still didn't think she did anything wrong. In fact, she kept denying it, despite being clearly seen in the video. Okay, since you insist, let's watch this, I said, playing a different video. Oh, come on. What about your wife?
If that's the case, aren't you okay with your husband?
On the screen, Melinda was intimately engaged with a much younger man, maybe in his 30s, on a bed. It's okay. I only need you, Rocky. My husband is nothing to me.
I'm so happy, but you know my wife has been cutting my allowance again.
Again? What an incapable wife. Don't worry, I'll give you some money. Melinda then wrapped her arms around the young man's neck, embracing him. It was as if she was trying to absorb the youthfulness from the younger man. Though I hadn't seen it before, it looked like something straight out of a club scene.
Thank you, Melinda. I love you.
You're so sweet. Seeing the video of Melinda's alluring voice and actions, even my husband couldn't help but look away. The young officer looked queasy, as if he was about to say, ew. And the older officer quietly scolded him.
Hey,
stop it. Don't show such nonsense, Melinda yelled, her face turning bright red. My husband, perhaps feeling it was none of his concern, seemed about to laugh at Melinda's losing her usual composure. Really, Tommy? You think it's funny?
Huh?
Please, watch this too. I played another video.
I love Nancy the most.
Then another.
I've never loved anyone but Anna. Just kidding. How was it? Good?
And another.
Ashley, stroke my head.
Hearing this, the young police officer burst into laughter beyond control. While the older one scolded him again. In the video, Ashley was stroking my husband's head, asking, "How many others are you seeing?" My husband responded like a script.
Only you, Ashley.
Liar. At this point in the video, there were already 3 women, and including those I just checked, at least 8. Really? I love you, Tommy. So, about that.
I know. You mean the bag, right? Don't worry. I make good money. I'll get you a gift.
Yay! This pattern repeated with the other women. Apparently, my husband had been leading a life where he gave women gifts in exchange for letting him secretly film their encounters. What a hobby. You might have noticed he's making a huge loss buying brand name items for each video. And the only video showing Melinda's actions was that one. It seems the recording button was accidentally left on, capturing the moment Melinda stole my things and her own actions. Rest assured, it's not some peculiar hobby to watch Melinda's actions. Or maybe not. Melinda and my husband, embarrassed and exposed even to the police, were pale and slumped in defeat. But it wasn't over yet. Just as I thought this, the intercom rang. "They're here," I said. Melinda looked at me with a tired face. Ignoring her gaze, I went to the entrance and welcomed Bruce. Seeing Bruce, Melinda lost her words and screamed, "Ah! Ah!"
Seems like you were cheating in your son's house, huh? Cecile told me.
No, it's not like that.
What do you mean it's not? Cecile, could you play the video?
With pleasure. After casting a cold glance at the bewildered Melinda, Bruce burst into loud laughter as he watched her flirtatious video.
An old woman like this, seducing a young man for money? Aren't you ashamed? Oh, my stomach hurts from laughing.
What? I thought Bruce would be shocked by the video, but his unexpected reaction surprised me.
You're just a wallet to him, clearly after your money. Pathetic.
Bruce laughed uproariously, clapping his hands. Melinda, embarrassed, blushed furiously, her previously defiant attitude gone.
That was funny. Let's see my son's too. Let's see how much he's grown.
Bruce said, laughing while focusing on a particular part of my husband in the video. After watching all the infidelity videos, Bruce commented with a straight face.
Both mother and son, letting young people take their money. Beyond disappointing, it's pitiful.
Needless to say, Melinda and my husband would have preferred being laughed at. What we learned from my questioning was that Melinda accidentally found out about my husband's affairs. She kept it secret, in exchange for using our house to meet her own lover. For Melinda, it was embarrassing to be seen with a much younger man, and her lover, lacking money and having a wife, couldn't easily find places to meet. For my husband, having the freedom to invite girls he met online without going out was cheaper and much more convenient. Thus, Melinda and my husband, keeping each other's affairs secret, turned this house into their paradise of indulgence, becoming accomplices. Their arrangement worked by one leaving the house while the other one met their lover. Melinda never imagined the videos would be accidentally recorded.
I'm sorry, Cecile. Bruce, I'll return the money. Do anything, please. Forgive me. Me too, Cecile. I'll change. Do anything. Please forgive me.
Melinda and my husband begged, bowing their heads. Bruce and I exchanged glances and laughed. You'll do anything, right?
Indeed, anything.
They both answered.
Of course. Of course.
To our question. Then let's divorce.
What? What?
Our simultaneous declaration to divorce left my husband and Melinda in shock.
You said you'd do anything, right? Let's get a divorce.
No, wait. Anything but that, please.
No way.
Bruce, without hesitation, refused Melinda's desperate pleas and deep apologies. The divorce was not retracted. My husband, too, was crying and deeply apologizing, but I did not withdraw the divorce either. Thus, only hours after returning from my parents' home post-childbirth, my divorce was decided upon under police supervision. Later, I had my husband pay me the same amount as the sold items as compensation in the divorce trial. Additionally, I demanded double the standard amount for alimony and compensation for infidelity. Why double? I slightly intimidated them by saying, "You know your mistresses seem to be married. I could inform their spouses." This was mainly a bluff, as I didn't even know their names at the time. And it's like I noticed that they're married because of the ring in the video. The threat was effective immediately, given the number of mistresses involved. My husband, terrified at the thought of being sued by each spouse, agreed to pay double the standard amount. Meanwhile, Bruce furiously obtained the lover's contact details from a crying Melinda and called him over. He informed the lover and his wife of the affair, leading to their divorce too. Both spouses demanded compensation from their cheating partners in the divorce trials. Though I promised not to inform the mistress's spouses, I never said I wouldn't demand compensation from the mistresses themselves. After extracting all the communication from my husband's smartphone, I contacted each woman to claim compensation for the affair, which they agreed to pay. Secretly, I was glad my husband had had so many mistresses. It turned out to be quite profitable. But as a single mother without a steady job, I knew I could never have too much money. Turning the harm I suffered into financial compensation didn't erase the damage done. So, with a substantial sum of money, I divorced my husband. 8 years have passed since then, Eventually, my husband ended up paying compensation to his mistress's spouses too. Their husbands, noticing their wives suddenly had a lot of money, grew suspicious. This led to the discovery of the affairs, resulting in some divorces. My husband, now overwhelmed with debt from the numerous compensations, was offered help by a certain woman. A goddess descended, he must have thought. But alas, this woman turned out to be a bad one. He thought they were close to marriage, only to find out she was already engaged to another man. My husband had spent what little money he had on a ring and dates for her, only to end up with a big loss and a broken heart. He never learns. Of course, I can't muster any sympathy for him. Melinda, having proposed marriage to her affair partner after her divorce, was spectacularly rejected. Still, she didn't give up, repeatedly ambushing him on his commute, until she was cautioned under a public nuisance ordinance. Of course, naturally, that was the end of her relationship with her lover, who, as Bruce said, had only seen her as a wallet from the start. Well, everyone should be able to see it. Melinda was the only one who hadn't realized she was being used. It's a laughable tale. As for Bruce, after separating from Melinda and becoming estranged from his son, I worried about him being alone. But it seems the compensation money from the divorce trial sparked an interest in bonsai. Now he's happily involved in a circle with people who share his hobby. That's a relief. Though I didn't expect it, I looked him up, and sure enough, he'd even set up an SNS account. I've discreetly followed you, father-in-law. And me, honestly, fed up with men, marriage, no more, and still going strong as a single mother. I relied on my parents until my child was old enough for daycare, then started job hunting. Juggling child rearing, it took about a year, but I found a great company that's understanding of single mothers. There are others like me there, so although we sometimes work late, we're usually allowed to leave on time. I used to think single mothers had to work nonstop, but with proper allowances and just my daughter to care for, we live quite normally without extravagant luxuries. There's talk of a promotion when my child reaches middle school. I haven't decided yet, but I want to consider what will make my daughter happiest and my parents too. Despite everything, the joy comes from meals shared with my daughter and sometimes my parents. Oh, I did well to leave that man. Serves him right. He never even got to be called Dad by my adorable daughter. My marriage ended in a crazy way, but as a parent, I still hope my daughter finds a good person and has a happy marriage. Until the day she brings home a wonderful man, I'll do my best as a mother. So, off to work again today.
My name is Emily Davis, and I am 21 years old. After graduating from culinary school, I began working at the coffee shop my parents own and operate. We have many regular customers, and I absolutely love this beloved spot in our town. I have tremendous respect for my parents who have run this shop for so long. Although working while studying was more challenging than I thought, I was satisfied with my fulfilling daily life. However, a call from Bob disrupted this routine. The call came out of the blue. My wife had an accident. Bob sounded unusually flustered over the phone. Although my parents and I didn't know the details of the accident, we were deeply worried about my sister-in-law. Bob asked us to look after his children while he was at the hospital, and we readily agreed. My nieces and nephew are still quite young and need a lot of attention. Before heading to the hospital, Bob brought the two children to our coffee shop. They seemed bewildered by what was happening, but I welcomed them into the shop to reassure them. We received another call from Bob 2 hours later. We breathed a sigh of relief when we learned that my sister-in-law's life was not in danger. However, she had a severe sprain in her foot and needed to rest at home for a while. So Bob asked us to continue looking after the children for a bit longer. I was torn. My parents have the coffee shop to run, and I also work there as an employee, so it would be impossible for us to do this every day. After discussing with my parents, we agreed that I would take care of my nieces and nephew for about 2 weeks. At first, I was nervous about whether I could take proper care of my nieces and nephew. However, they quickly warmed up to me, and they were well behaved without being particularly demanding, so I managed to pull through. When things got tough, as I was not accustomed to looking after children, my mother was there to support me. 2 weeks later, the need for me to look after my nieces and nephew had passed, and life returned to normal. But then, I received another call from Bob. He said, "My wife is still not feeling well. I would appreciate it if you could look after the kids when she asks for help." Honestly, I wasn't sure what to do at the time. In the end, I couldn't bear to leave my nieces and nephew unattended, so I replied, "I can do it occasionally." Sure enough, just a few days later, my sister-in-law sent me a message saying, "Could you watch the kids tomorrow?" I replied, "Okay." On the day my sister-in-law had requested my help, I went to pick up my nephews in the morning, dropped them off at kindergarten, and then brought them back home in the afternoon to take care of them. My mother occasionally dropped by to check on things. In the evening, after dinner and a bath for the kids, we waited for Bob to pick them up. When Bob arrived, I handed him the dinner my mother had brought for him and his wife. He said, "That's a lifesaver," as he took the children and went home. Honestly, I wondered if all this was necessary, and I was exhausted from the unfamiliar tasks. However, I couldn't leave Bob's family to fend for themselves. Both my mother and I did what we could. Then, a few days later, I got another message from my sister-in-law. "Could you help out with the kids again?" Just like the previous time, I went to pick up the children in the morning and headed to the kindergarten. The kindergarten teachers seemed to have remembered me, which made the drop-off process smoother. The boys waved goodbye, saying, "See you, Emily," and happily went off to kindergarten without any fuss. After that, I helped out at the cafe where my parents worked. However, it was only a short while before it was time to pick up the children again. My father pointed out the time, and I quickly left the cafe. At the kindergarten, there were already a few people waiting to pick up their children. As I waited for the boys to come out, someone called me from behind. "Emily?" I turned around in surprise to see a senior I knew from school. "Ashley?" It was an unexpected reunion. "Long time no see." She told me her child was also attending the same kindergarten as my nephews. I wanted to chat with Ashley, but it wasn't really a situation where we could stand around and talk, so we exchanged contact information and parted ways. The next day, Ashley came to the cafe during my shift. My parents, seeing the situation, told us to take our time and chat when there were fewer customers. I decided to take advantage of my parents' offer and chat with Ashley. It seemed that Ashley, my senior from school, really took a liking to our cafe, which made me quite happy. However, she suddenly became serious, as if she remembered something, and began to speak. "By the way, I saw your nephew's mom the other day." I blinked in surprise at the unexpected topic and just nodded in response. "Really?" "Yeah, I didn't speak to her, but I have talked to her before, so I'm certain it was her. But there's something." Ashley seemed to struggle to find the right words, piquing my interest, so I urged her to go on. The contents of her words left me astonished. Moreover, it seemed my mom overheard Ashley's conversation, and our eyes met. After Ashley left, I asked Mom what she thought about what had been discussed. "Let's keep an eye on the situation a little longer." I nodded in agreement. Then, one day, I got a sudden call from Bob. I couldn't pick up immediately, and the call ended, but noticing multiple missed calls in my call log, I quickly called him back. "What the hell is going on?" I was confused and asked him back. "What? What happened?" Bob spoke in a voice that seemed to suppress his anger. Apparently, he went home to pick up something he'd forgotten and found the kids home alone in a house that should have been empty. I was shocked at Bob's story. At the same time, a question arose. Why am I the one being yelled at? My question seemed to further ignite Bob's anger. "My wife told me she asked you to take care of the kids today, and yet you left them alone, and you have the nerve to talk back to me?" I was taken aback by Bob's words, but there were several things I couldn't agree with, so I retorted. "Yes, your wife sent me a message, but I told her I couldn't do it today. Mom fell ill last night, and we are short-staffed. I have to work at the cafe and don't have time to look after the kids." Upon hearing my explanation, Bob went quiet. "According to my wife," then asked me a question. She said every time she asked you to take care of the kids, you complained and demanded to be paid. Is this true? I couldn't help but raise my voice in the middle of the conversation. What? I've never said anything like that. I've never explicitly asked for money I've spent on the kids, and Mom should know that too. If you have doubts, why don't you ask her? When I retorted in an angry tone, Bob fell completely silent. Then he muttered, "So what was that story about the money my wife was talking about?" "I have no idea. You should ask your wife about it." When I stated clearly, Bob, sounding tired, said, "I'll do that." Although I was hesitant to pile on with my next revelation, I couldn't stay silent after hearing the current conversation and decided to share what I'd heard from Senior Ashley. After hearing the story, Bob said in a genuinely exhausted voice, "Give me some time to think," and hung up the phone. Afterwards, as I started to calm down, I became worried about Bob and decided to tell Mom what I had said to him. A while passed without any word from Bob, and during that time, my parents and I were worried. However, a few days later, another message arrived from Bob's wife. It was the same as usual. She was asking me to take care of the kids, and at first, I thought of refusing. I had been doing so much for her and the kids out of goodwill, but knowing that I had been talked about behind my back, I felt ridiculed. But Mom stopped me. She told me to contact Bob before replying to Bob's wife, and I forwarded the message to him. A few minutes later, a reply came from Bob. It seemed he had been distressed, but he seemed to have made up his mind after my message. After hearing Bob's feelings, I replied to Bob's wife, "Okay," and went to pick up the kids as usual. After taking the kids to kindergarten, I contacted someone. Hanging up the phone, I braced myself. Everything was ready. When I arrived at the coffee shop, Bob was already there. Bob's face was tense, whether from nervousness or anxiety. It was the first time I saw him like this, and I hesitated about how to approach him, but then Mom went up to him and said, "I'll pick up the kids, so don't worry. You need to see for yourself and focus on talking things out with your wife. Emily, I'm counting on you." Bob, looking startled by Mom's words, nodded. Then I nodded back at Mom too. "Okay, I'm off." I set off for Bob's house along with him. Bob paused in front of his house, fumbling for his keys. I noticed his hands shaking, but pretended not to see. Faint voices of my sister-in-law and a few other women were audible from inside the house. Bob unlocked the door and slowly pushed it open. We stepped inside quietly, trying not to make a sound. The chatter was now clearer. "So, how's your foot doing?" I could hear my sister-in-law replying to the woman's question. "Oh, it's fine. Almost completely healed." Oh, I knew it, I thought. The strange feeling I'd had recently seemed to be resolved. For a moment, I was distracted, but I snapped back to attention and focused on what my sister-in-law was saying. "But once it's fully healed, my husband will probably find out, and I won't be able to laze around like I can now." "Oh, right. Your sister-in-law and her parents are looking after the kids, aren't they? How lucky!" "Yeah, really lucky that Emily isn't married. I'm so grateful to have an unemployed single homebody living at home." Hearing my sister-in-law's words, I felt my body getting hot with anger. I had suspected that we might be being exploited by my sister-in-law, but I hadn't imagined she would think this way. I reached my limit, burst open the door to the living room, and stormed in. My sister-in-law looked shocked when she saw me. I glared at her and said, "Yes, I'm not married and I'm living at home, but I'm not exactly idle. I thought we were helping out because you guys were in trouble. I didn't think you would talk about it like this." But my sister-in-law seemed more interested in why I was here and how I got into the house. She looked at me and said, Why are you here? How did you get into the house?" I felt a tap on my shoulder and stepped back. When she finally noticed Bob, her eyes widened. In a voice as cold as mine, if not colder, Bob said, "I let us in. You've been lying to me all this time. You're the worst. You've been using the money I gave you for yourself instead of giving it to Emily, haven't you?" My sister-in-law turned as white as a sheet. I approached my sister-in-law's friends and told them it was time to leave. Everyone left with awkward expressions on their faces. Among them, there was one person who made eye contact with me as she left. That was Senior Ashley, Ashley had previously had interactions with my sister-in-law. However, she seemed to have some concerns about my sister-in-law's recent behavior, and when we unexpectedly met again, she offered to help with this situation. Once all of the friends left, my sister-in-law began to talk, crying. To make her story short, this was the story she excused. Ever since the birth of their second child, taking care of the kids became increasingly difficult. But Bob was always busy with work and couldn't help with childcare or housework, which was tough. When she got injured, my mother and I began to help out, and things got a lot easier. Because of this, she ended up relying on us. About the money Bob gave her, she had not had any disposable income since getting married, and she couldn't resist using the money because of this. Frankly, I wasn't convinced by my sister-in-law's excuses. Perhaps sensing my feelings, Bob suggested it was time to leave for the day. I took his advice and left Bob's house. When I got home, my mother was waiting with a worried look on her face. It seemed like my dad was looking after my nephews, so I took this chance to explain everything to my mother. She made a complicated expression and said, "I see. It's a problem between those two now," and went back to my nephews. I followed her. My nephews, who knew nothing of the situation, greeted me with smiles and called out, "Aunt Emily!" Although I felt a complex mix of emotions, I did my best not to show it on my face and responded to my nephews. Several hours later, Bob returned home. He said he would be staying at our parents' house for the night. My mother, seeming to understand Bob's thoughts, merely responded with, "I see." After putting his kids to bed, Bob explained his decision to our parents and me. "I won't divorce her this time, but if she repeats the same mistake, then I'll consider divorce. Emily, I'm sorry for what you've been through. And you too, Mom." "No, it's okay, but are you sure that's what you want, bro?" Worried about their relationship, I asked Bob. He nodded and said, "Yeah, after talking to my wife, I realized I'm partly to blame too. We've decided to give it another try together." I asked Bob what he meant. He said, "I've been all about work and never really paid attention to my wife. I also left the kids entirely up to her. I now realize that this might have put undue pressure on her, and I've been unfair to our kids. I should have spent more quality time with them." Listening to Bob, I honestly had mixed feelings, but Mom said, "I get it. As an individual, it's hard to forgive what your wife did to us. But as a wife and a mother, I can't say I don't understand the feelings at all. If this is the decision you both have made, I won't oppose it. But make sure you don't involve others in your problems again." At Mom's words, Bob nodded, biting his lip. Since then, neither Bob nor my sister-in-law have asked anything of me. Especially, I haven't seen her even once. It must be awkward for her to face me. My father is angry, saying she can't even apologize, but truthfully, I prefer not to see my sister-in-law to avoid bringing back unpleasant memories. When I told Bob this, he promised, "I understand. I'll try to avoid having you and her meet as much as possible." Thanks to that, my everyday life returned to normal. Hearing the sound of the bell, I turned around. At the entrance stood Bob, with my nephews at his sides. Letting go of Bob's hand, my nephews raced over to me first, calling out my name. "Aunt Emily!" I happily responded with a smile to my adorable nephews. While the kids were chatting with my parents over cake, Bob quietly told me that although sister-in-law was remorseful, however, she disliked the kids going to see me because they were fond of me. But hearing that, I couldn't help but think she had brought it upon herself. There may come a time in the future when I have to face her again. However, right now, it doesn't seem likely that I will forget what sister-in-law did to me anytime soon.
Where are you right now? Are you okay? With my heart pounding in my chest, I tried to check on my husband, but to my surprise, my husband was perfectly fine. In fact, he lets out a heavy sigh over the phone and dismissively replies, "What's all this about? I'm at work as usual. Stop calling me when I'm busy." At this point, it was confirmed. I was sure that he was lying to me. It's time for me to put my long-held plan into action. My name is Mary, and I'm 30 years old. I work as a nurse at a senior care facility, where I face the daily reality of aging. Looking back, people used to tell me in my student days that I was naturally caring. So when I grew up, it only made sense for me to choose a profession where I could put that nature to good use. The residents at their facility range from those who are relatively active to those suffering from dementia. Every time one of them thanks me, I feel a sense of fulfillment, and I have a loving husband. His name is Mark, and like me, he's also 30. It's almost been 3 years since we got married, and we've been able to live a happy married life. Although we don't have children yet, there's no particular dissatisfaction. I still wanted to enjoy my time with my husband. However, my husband has been working overtime and working on holidays. He works at a bank and is busy every day. Even so, I had never heard of working on holidays at the bank, so I was a little suspicious. Lately, he's been coming home from work looking irritated and sighing. He often doesn't eat the prepared dinner, and our time together has greatly decreased. These days continued for a while, and I, worried, decided to probe my husband. I subtly called out to him as he relaxed with a beer after returning home. "Hey Mark, you've been coming home late lately. Is work that busy?" Yeah, it's busy." My husband replied, looking tired. "You know, the new semester's coming up, right? Maybe that's why we have a lot of customers for transfers and account openings. That kind of work takes quite a bit of time." "Is that so? But banks have strict business hours, right? Even so, do they have overtime and work on holidays?" Upon my inquiry, my husband's eyebrow twitched. I didn't miss that moment. That reaction. Maybe there really is no overtime or working on holidays. But Mark wouldn't lie about something like that. Seeing me deep in thought, my husband quickly said, "That's not it." He started to explain with a broad smile, as if making an excuse. "Actually, there's a lot of work that doesn't finish within business hours. New employees are coming soon, right? I'm also working on making manuals for them. It's just really busy." "Manuals? Are you the one making them, Mark?" Yeah. All the other employees said they are bad at it, so I had no choice but to do it." "Oh, I see. Well, that's the gist of it. Even if I come home late, don't worry. I might be at home less, but I'll make sure to earn properly in return." Saying this, my husband resumed his beer and started playing games. What my husband is saying is logical, but there's one thing that feels out of place. It's that he said he's creating manuals. It may not be a nice thing to say, but my husband is inherently technophobic. He can do the bare minimum of operations required for work, but he has virtually no tolerance for computer work. On the other hand, I'm good with machines, so I often teach my husband how to operate them. I can't imagine him, of all people, creating manuals for new employees. After all, manuals should be adding changes to the original copy. Would they really leave that to Mark, a single employee? My sense of discomfort grew, and my suspicion towards my husband increased. A few days later, something happened. My husband, who had been coming home late from overtime, unusually returned home at 6 p.m. But after eating dinner, he said he felt sick and went out for a walk. I suggested he rest early, but "I want to breathe some fresh air," he said, and left somewhat forcibly. It was the first time my husband had said something like this, so I was puzzled. Feeling sick and going for a walk? What would he do if he collapsed while out? Unable to shake my unease, I decided to secretly follow my husband so he wouldn't notice. However, contrary to my worries, he moved on with a light step. My husband stopped at a small park a little distance from our home. After looking around as if to be cautious, he started to call someone on his smartphone. A few minutes later, a white car parked right next to my husband. He immediately got into the passenger seat of the car. There was an unfamiliar woman in the driver's seat. What's with that car? What's the relationship with Mark? Just as I was about to approach the car with suspicion, the woman and Mark were in a tight embrace inside the car. What? What are you doing? My voice involuntarily quivers at the sight. Unaware of my confusion, the two exchange a passionate kiss. My husband and this unknown woman desiring each other. By the time I realized I was taking out my phone and turning on the camera. After capturing my husband's affair in photos and videos, I was snapped back to reality by the sound of the engine. By the time I regained my composure, the car had already driven off. Confusion, disgust, shock, sorrow. Various emotions were swirling inside me. When I finally managed to return home, a text from Mark arrived saying, "I met up with a friend, so I'll be home late." A friend? That can't be right. The scene of the affair replays in my mind over and over. I just couldn't believe his words. In the end, Mark came home after 2 a.m. As my dissatisfaction was about to explode, I held back my tears and thrust the screen of my phone at him. "Hey, what is this?" "Huh?" I can see Mark's eyes darting around, clearly shaken. Seeing such an obvious reaction, I felt an indescribable feeling. "Explain yourself!" As I confronted the stuttering Mark, he showed a forceful smile. "No, it's not like that, Mary. She's just a friend." "A friend? Do you hug your friends like that?" "It's not like that. It's like a friendship between men and women, like comrades. It doesn't mean anything deeper." "Then what about this photo? You're clearly kissing, right?" That angle is bad. It only looked like we were kissing from your angle. I didn't do anything like that, and I wouldn't. I have an important wife named Mary. I wouldn't do something like cheat." After that, Mark continued to make excuses, desperately trying to cover up. It's really not what you think. Please believe me. I didn't do anything like that. He pleaded with a pained expression as if he was the victim. He wouldn't let me get a word in, but his shallow words wouldn't change how I feel. I decided to watch him a bit more. With that decision, I started monitoring his activities at home the next day. Then, things I didn't think much of before started catching my eye. I used to think he was just playing games, but he spent a lot of time looking at his phone. He checks his phone while watching TV, takes it with him to the bathroom when he bathes, and even when he sleeps, he holds onto his phone until he falls asleep. He's probably in touch with that woman from the car. He probably thinks it would be bad if I saw it, so he takes it with him wherever he goes. Ever since that day I confronted him about his affair, he's been coming home right on time, as if all his previous overtime was a lie. Mary, I'm home. I bought a cake on my way back today. Let's eat it together. A cake? Why all of a sudden? No particular reason. You like sweet things, right, Mary? I thought you might be tired. Thank you. Mark smiles and hands me the box of a cake. He's clearly trying to cheer me up. Even though he used to say he was working overtime, he started coming home on time as soon as I confronted him about his affair. Does he not think that's strange? Does he think that if he can get on my good side, it will be as if that date never happened? I am disappointed and appalled by his shallow plan and find myself unable to say anything. My feelings for Mark have been fading day by day, and before I knew it, I was only speaking the bare minimum to him. This gives Mark some room to breathe. Perhaps relieved that I'm not saying anything, he starts working overtime again. When Mark comes home late at night, I ask, "What were you doing?" With a frustrated expression, he responded, "Why do I have to explain everything? Don't you trust me at all?" Huh? Are you seriously saying that? After what you did before? You have the audacity to use the word trust? That's why. She's just a friend. By doubting me so much, aren't you, Mary, the one doing something shady? Huh? How did you come to that conclusion? Just because it's inconvenient for you, don't make me the bad guy. That's what I want to say, even though I keep saying it's not like that. Do you enjoy suspecting your husband's infidelity? Enjoy? No way. If I could, I wouldn't want to suspect the husband I love. However, it's harder to not suspect him in this situation. The one who's behaved suspiciously first was none other than Mark himself. Since that day, my husband and I have been in a cold war. At the same time, his behavior escalated and he began to smirk as he openly played with his smartphone at home. Perhaps he thinks he was not found out. He even started making phone calls on the balcony late at night. By this point, my husband's infidelity is 100% certain. However, photos from my smartphone alone are insufficient evidence. I decided to secretly request a detective agency to investigate his infidelity. 2 weeks later, on my way to pick up the report I had requested, I saw multiple patrol cars rushing by with sirens blaring. I was curious, as I don't usually see so many patrol cars, when a news notification came in on my smartphone app. "A robbery at ABC Bank. The culprits are in a standoff." The headline jumped into my sight and my heart pounded. ABC Bank? Isn't that the bank where Mark works? Even though my feelings had already cooled down, I felt a strong sense of unease. What if something happened to Mark? Thinking about the worst case scenario, a cold sweat ran down my back. I immediately took out my smartphone and frantically called my husband. Please be safe. I wondered why I still felt this way about him who had betrayed me. However, I don't have time to think about that right now. After several rings, a curt voice responded, "What?" In response, I blurted out a question to him. "Where are you now? Are you okay?" In a panic, I checked on the safety of my husband who was likely at the scene. He sighed deeply and with an annoyed tone said, "What's up all of a sudden? I'm at work now, isn't it obvious?" "You're at work. So you're at ABC Bank, right? Are you okay?" "Huh? What? What's what?" "Don't call me during work hours if you don't need anything. I'm busy." Without waiting for my response, he hung up the phone. At that moment, the slight love I had left for my husband froze over. I hope he's safe. Just a few minutes ago, I was genuinely thinking that. However, now I only feel disgust towards him. Why can he be so calm when there's a robbery and standoff happening at his workplace? To begin with, he shouldn't be able to touch his phone during an incident. It was then that I finally realized he must still be somewhere with his mistress. Fueled by anger, I called a moving company and headed straight to the detective agency. After receiving plenty of incriminating photos, I headed directly to the city hall. As soon as I returned home, I packed all my essentials into a box and organized my belongings. While signing the divorce papers I got from the city hall, suddenly the intercom rang. At the door, immediate response movers were waiting. I entrusted them with the boxes filled with my stuff, which they delivered to my new home. I looked around the empty room. I asked myself, is this really the right choice? Yes, it's okay. My choice is absolutely not a mistake. I left the divorce papers and the removed wedding ring on the table, and without hesitation, I left the house I lived in with my husband. The place I headed after leaving the house was an apartment near my workplace. I had rented the room in advance just in case anything happened after I noticed my husband's infidelity. When I arrived, the mover's truck was already parked there, so I proceeded to move in my belongings. As I was unpacking and thinking about the future, the vibration of my smartphone alerted me to an incoming call. The screen displayed Mark. I took a deep breath, composed my turbulent emotions, and answered his call. Hello?
Hey, Mary, where are you right now? When I got home, your stuff was gone.
I only took my belongings from home. Any problem?
You took your stuff? What the hell are you talking about?
Mark's urgency was palpable, transmitted over the phone. I conveyed the facts to him in a calm manner. I will not return to that house anymore. You saw what was on the table, didn't you?
The table? Huh. What is this, divorce papers? This is not a joke. Don't mess around.
Mess around? I'm being very serious, though.
That's crazy. Why do I have to see divorce papers as soon as I get home?
I was filled with simmering anger at his selfishness, being negative about the divorce while he was doing the worst thing. There's no more sympathy left for such a man. Having made up my mind, I let my accumulated anger explode. Stop messing around. Stop joking. What you were doing was not work. It was an affair. I already know everything. It's strange that you can call me while a robbery is going on at your workplace.
A robbery?
Yes, a robbery broke into your workplace today. Despite causing a major fuss, you had no knowledge of it, which means you weren't at the bank.
No way, a standoff? That's...
Where were you during that time? With whom? If you can answer, try answering, you piece of shit. As I shouted over the phone, my husband seemed to realize he could not hide it anymore and confessed to his infidelity in resignation.
I'm sorry. I met a woman on a dating app in a moment of my weakness.
Oh, a dating app, huh?
I wanted some excitement in life. Every day ends at the scheduled time. There is no fun. I wanted to change such a life.
So you cheated sneakily.
I won't do it anymore. I beg you, please forgive me. You're all I have.
He pleaded desperately, but of course, I did not respond. Shut up. Go seek your thrill on your own. Don't you dare contact me ever again. I hung up the phone with force and threw my smartphone onto the sofa. Afterwards, since my husband was reluctant to sign the divorce papers, I had to resort to hiring a lawyer and claim damages from him and his mistress. Feeling threatened by the lawyer's involvement, he quickly agreed to the divorce and promised to pay the full amount of damages. The woman, angry at being sued for damages, promptly left my husband. I feel annoyed to express gratitude to a woman who laid hands on my own husband, but I was able to take revenge on my husband because of her. So I thank her for cheating with my husband. I was able to throw away the unnecessary things and finally step into a valuable life. For a while, days of striving at work will continue. I will live each day cherishing it, proud of my own life.
My name is Avery. I'm a 62-year-old housewife. My husband, who I was married to for many years, passed away 2 years ago due to a sudden illness. Now, I live modestly, managing the inheritance my husband left me. I have 2 sons. Both are already married. But when my eldest son Henry got married, he and his wife offered to live with me. I said, I appreciate your concern for me, but I'm still fit and fine on my own. I don't want to be a burden to you newlyweds. But Henry insisted.
I can't bear to leave you to die alone. I'm the eldest son. Let me take care of you. Don't worry about being a nuisance.
And so we ended up living together. Henry's wife, Rhea, is still young. She's 9 years younger than Henry, only 23. At first, I worried if such a young girl could handle being a wife, but she was the one Henry chose. I found no reason to object to their marriage, so I accepted it. When we decided to live together, I asked Henry, is Rhea okay with living with me? Won't a young girl like her dislike living with an old woman like me? Henry reassured me, saying,
It's fine. Rhea is kind. She'll get along with you. Besides, having you around will help us with the housework.
He was adamant about us living together. I couldn't find a reason to object after hearing that. Sure, I'm getting on in years, and it's too late to start worrying when something happens. Thinking that it'd be more reassuring than living alone, I gratefully accepted Henry's proposal. After we had been living together for a while, there was a time when I asked Rhea, sorry to ask, but could you bring in the laundry? I'm going out to get groceries for dinner. Up until then, I hadn't often asked her for anything. But that day, I had unavoidable errands to run before shopping, so I decided to ask her. But then Rhea retorted, Why do I have to do it? I'm busy right now. You should bring it in before you go, shouldn't you? She seemed busy playing a game on her smartphone. Even before that, she hadn't helped with any household chores. But I chose not to say anything out of consideration. However, seeing her just lying there playing her game that day, I said a bit more firmly, "If it's just a game, you can play it later, right? Could you please help out a bit?" Rhea, looking annoyed, grumbled, "You're always nagging. Whoever's free should do the chores, right? You could bring it in before shopping. You're really annoying." And with a glare at me, she went to the balcony to bring in the laundry. I was taken aback by her rudeness, but I thought it wouldn't do any good to say anything more and upset her further. So I left the house as it was. After that day, Rhea began to harass me. Ignoring me became a daily occurrence. When she didn't like the food I cooked, she would say to Henry, "I can't eat this. Hey, let's go out and eat. Just the two of us." And they would go out to eat, leaving me behind. Henry did try to consider my feelings, saying, "Think about Mom, too. She went through all this trouble to cook." But when Rhea was in a bad mood, all he could do was say, "Sorry, Mom. We're going to eat out today," and follow Rhea's orders. Rhea never did any housework, no matter how much I asked. Instead, she said, "You're not working right. Aren't you ashamed to rely on Henry for everything at your age? It's normal for you to do the chores, isn't it?" She acted as if it was completely natural for me to do all the housework. Rhea accused me of not working, but she wasn't working either. But she felt superior because she was supporting Henry, who was working. I hadn't told Rhea, but I wasn't unemployed. I had a little income from managing the apartment left to me by my husband. I also gave Henry living expenses, so I wasn't completely dependent on him. But Rhea seemed to think that because I wasn't working outside the home, I didn't have any income. So Henry was footing all the bills. Once, when I was cleaning, Rhea shouted at me, "Can't you clean a little quieter? It's noisy." I was just vacuuming normally, but Rhea was on the phone call and was complaining about me to the person on the other end, saying, "Hello, sorry about that. Yeah, it's Henry's mom. She's really noisy, isn't she? She should be able to do the housework quietly." At this point, even I was annoyed, and I told Henry about what had happened that day when he came home from work. "You know, I'm not saying you have to do everything, but Rhea, you've been absolutely no help with the housework. Not only that, but I got scolded just for vacuuming. It's normal to share chores, and of course I do my part. But I can't handle doing everything alone, especially when I get complaints," I told her. Henry replied, "I'm sorry, I really am. I don't think Rhea means any harm. Maybe she was just in a bad mood today. I'll tell her to help out a bit more, so please, cut her some slack today." But he didn't really take the matter seriously. Even so, I hoped that Henry would talk to Rhea, and I decided to watch how things unfolded without saying anything. Half a year passed. Rhea's attitude hadn't changed at all, and she didn't even pretend to do housework. I was completely exhausted from doing all the chores for 3 people and being considerate of Rhea. At that time, my second son Lucas happened to say, "Mom, your birthday's coming up, right? Since your eldest son and his wife will probably celebrate it on the day, let us celebrate it for you today. Renly also has a present for you. So why don't we go out for dinner?" I was invited. Lucas and his wife live in an apartment about 30 minutes away from our house. We didn't get to see each other often, but Renly, Lucas's wife, was kind and gentle, and she cared for me a lot. I gladly accepted Lucas's invitation, saying, "I'd love to. Of course I'll go." That night, after preparing dinner for Henry and Rhea, I went out to dinner with Lucas and his family. They had booked my favorite restaurant and gave me flowers in a bag as a birthday present. I hadn't had such a good time in a while, and I couldn't help but express my honest feelings, saying, "Ah, this is so healing. I haven't felt this happy in a long time." Hearing my words, Lucas asked, "Did something happen with Henry? When you say it's been a while since you've been happy, I get worried. Have you been going through a hard time lately?" I hadn't planned to complain, but I explained that I was doing all the housework because Rhea wouldn't do any, and that I had been yelled at for being noisy and had been spoken to harshly. Lucas, after exchanging glances with Renly, said, "Mom, you don't have to live with them if it's tough. You can live on the income from the stocks and apartment rents that Dad left behind, right? You're only living with them because Henry wanted to, right? But if you're being treated so badly by Rhea, and Henry isn't helping you, you should just stop living with them. If it's hard for you to say it, I'll step in." Renly also said, "If you're lonely living alone, we can live together. I love you very much. Please don't hesitate." I was so happy I could cry. I thanked them for their words and decided to keep trying a little longer, knowing that I had allies. "Thank you, but I'll try a little harder. They're my precious family after all. I really want to get along with Rhea, too," I said. When I came home that night, the dishes they had eaten from were still in the sink. With a sigh, I tried to clean up, but thought, it's only natural for me to do this because I always do it. Let's leave it as it is today, and let the two of them tidy up tomorrow morning. So I left the dishes as they were and went to bed. The next morning, as I was preparing breakfast, Rhea got up. I said to her while cooking, "Good morning, Rhea. I'll prepare breakfast. Could you wash the dishes you used yesterday?" However, Rhea ignored my words and started fiddling with her smartphone as she sat down on the couch. Even I couldn't hold back my irritation at Rhea's attitude, so I raised my voice. "It's common courtesy to wash your own dishes." Then Rhea replied in her usual manner, "I've said it 1,000,000 times. Isn't that your job, Mom-in-law? You know the saying, 'He who does not work, neither shall he eat.' You eat every day, so you have to do the housework." Upon hearing our exchange, Henry hurriedly got up and asked, "What's happening this early in the morning? Are you two arguing?" He looked at me with a puzzled face. I told Henry with a sigh, "I only asked Rhea to wash the dishes you guys ate with yesterday. I just said what's obvious." Hearing my reply, Henry said, "What the hell? This early in the morning?" and tried to go wash his face, seemingly annoyed. But I couldn't contain myself and snapped, "It's not about that. Every single day, I do all the housework, all of it, including yours. Do you understand how hard that is? At least you could wash your own dishes." Hearing me, who rarely gets angry, shout like that, Henry hurriedly said, "Sorry, I'll wash them," and tried to start doing the dishes. But Rhea said, Why does Henry, who works outside, have to do that? You're relying on Henry, so it's your job, Mom-in-law." She stopped Henry's hand, seemingly unsatisfied with him washing dishes. Then she said to me, "You're a poor god of poverty living on a pension, really a nuisance. Get out of this apartment." I had reached my breaking point. "Why do I have to leave my own house? The name on this house is mine, isn't it?" I told Rhea and to Henry. I confessed my true feelings. Rhea seems to be misunderstanding something. "But you understand, don't you, Henry? The ones who need to leave are you two. I can't stand living together anymore. I've reached my limit." Rhea, unable to hide her surprise, asked, "What do you mean? How can a jobless mother-in-law run a house? Aren't you relying on Henry?" I explained to her, "I am the landlord of this apartment. I am not renting. This apartment itself is mine. Sure, I wasn't working outside, but Henry's father left me stocks, apartments, and land when he passed away. I manage those stocks, apartments, and land, and earn enough income to live on my own. I've never relied on Henry financially, even after we started living together. I pay for most of the utilities and food costs." Rhea was speechless, then turned to Henry and said, "So we've been living without spending much money." Henry just nodded silently in response to her words. I added, "Henry might have wanted to show off to you, Rhea, but there's no way he could take care of all aspects of my life and take you out to eat, go shopping, and so on. Henry himself isn't earning that much yet." At that point, Rhea seemed to realize the gravity of the situation. She changed her attitude, her face pale, and said, "I'm sorry, mother-in-law. I didn't know anything, and I've been saying rude things. Please forgive me. If our living together ends, Rhea won't be able to live the way she has been." She realized this and kept repeating, "I'm sorry," in a flustered manner. Understanding the situation, they repeatedly apologized in a flustered manner. I told them, "I'm not saying I won't forgive you. We're family after all. But living together is out of the question. We need to resolve this. You two should rent a house and live there by yourselves." Henry reacted to my words with desperation. "I'd worry if something happened to you, Mom. From now on, Rhea and I will help with housework. I just don't want to leave you alone." However, I reassured him, "I'll be fine. If you're that worried, I'll live with Lucas and his family. They offered to live with me when we went out for dinner recently if I was anxious about living alone. I initially told them I'd try a little longer living with you two, but now I realize it's impossible. It may be a bother to Lucas, but I'm going to stay close to them." Henry seemed to understand my firm stance, responding with a mere, "I understand," and said nothing more. Rhea, on the other hand, spat out, "So you're abandoning us, despite the fact that we've been taking care of you." Her tone suggested I was at fault. I realized there was no point in arguing with her and didn't say anything more. Within a month from that day, Henry and Rhea found a place and moved out. Due to the cost of rent, it seemed they could only afford a fairly old and small apartment. Rhea, who had never worked before, apparently started a part-time job to support their living. Henry informed me that Rhea was constantly complaining about juggling housework and her job. Their life seemed to be filled with nonstop arguments, and Henry seemed completely worn out. Henry kept contacting me saying, "If only you'd forgive us. We'd like to live together again." But I had no intention of going through that again. After Henry and the others left, I moved in with Lucas and his family after some time. Even though I told them there was no need to push themselves, Lucas said, "It actually helps us a lot to live with you, Mom. Renly really wants to live with you too. She wants to learn how to cook like you do." And so we decided to live together. Since we started living together, they have told me, "It's okay to say if there's something you don't like, okay? We'll do what we can when it comes to housework, making sure we don't inconvenience each other." I spend my days cooking with Renly, enjoying my hobbies, and just having a fulfilling time. Right now I am very happy. From now on, I want to live in a way that doesn't destroy this happiness. Huh? Mother-in-law? The doorbell rang, and I widened my eyes in surprise when I checked the monitor. No wonder, because on the screen was the image of my mother-in-law, who was supposed to be in the hospital. When I called my husband, he blatantly lied, saying,
"I'm visiting my mom at the hospital."
At that point, I realized I'd been lied to by my husband. Unbelievable. Using his own family to deceive people. I'll make him regret making a fool out of me. I teamed up with my mother-in-law and decided to move out. And so, my story to get revenge with my mother-in-law began. My name is Jessica, 29 years old. After graduating from college, I started working for a company and got married at 27. My husband's name is Bob. I met him, who is the same age as me, through my friend Olivia. I happened to encounter Bob when I was having lunch with Olivia. Since Olivia worked at the same company as Bob, she introduced him to me. From there, we exchanged our number, went out to dine together a couple of times, and started dating. After a year of dating, we happily tied the knot. Even after 2 years of marriage, we're still happily married. We're more like friends than lovers, so we say whatever we think. for better or worse, without holding back. As we were having dinner, he teased me a bit by saying,
Jessica, today's stew. Isn't it a bit bland?
You think so? I also thought it was a bit bland too when I tasted it.
Jess, you've been a housewife for 2 years now, but you're still bad at cooking, aren't you?
Stop it. If you're going to say things like that, then why don't you cook, Bob?
Sorry. Thanks for cooking always, even though you have your job too. I appreciate it, okay?
I guess I'll forgive you, but next time, take me to that fancy restaurant for dinner, okay?
All right. You're always so upbeat about these things. It's a bit troublesome, you know.
Even though we bicker like this, we never forget to show gratitude towards each other. That's how we roll. We do at times get into arguments, but I still loved Bob. Then one day, I received a text from Bob, who had been working overtime for consecutive days, saying,
I think I can come home early today.
We hadn't been able to have dinner together for a while. Today seemed like a day we could spend time together. Just as I was about to finish cooking, my phone rang. Hello? The first thing my husband did was apologize in a regretful voice.
I'm sorry, Jess. I won't be able to come home after all today.
What? But today, for the first time in a while, you said you would come home early.
Well, I thought so too, but I am far from getting my work done.
I see. I went through all the trouble to make dinner, but I guess it can't be helped.
I'm really sorry. I'll make it up to you, I promise.
Bob apologized over and over again. I can't blame him when he's this sorry. It can't be helped if it's because of work. I took the opportunity to ask him something that had been bothering me for a while. Hey, Bob, I feel like you've been working overtime a lot recently.
Huh, is that so? I feel like it's always been this way since a long time ago.
But you used to do it once a week, right? But lately it's practically every day.
I can't help it, can I? It's not like I want this myself.
My usually calm husband raised his voice in a rare display of anger. He seemed desperate. Something was definitely suspicious. For some reason, that was my intuition. As he hurried to hang up the phone, I held him back and asked him again, Bob, I hate to ask this, but you're really at work, right?
What's with that question? Of course I am. Don't tell me you think I'm cheating.
Why would you think that? I didn't say anything about cheating.
Well, that's because you sound like you're doubting me, Jessica.
My fault. All I did was ask if it's really work.
Anyway, can we drop it now? I still have work to do, so don't bother me.
With that, he abruptly hung up the phone. I couldn't help but sense his reluctance to be probed any further. What's with his attitude? Would someone normally get so angry just by being asked if it's work? Doesn't he have something he wants to hide? Thinking I couldn't get any further over the phone, I decided to wait for him to come home. When he got home a few hours later, he was in a very bad mood. He completely ignored my attempts to talk to him. Not only that, he went straight to bed without even touching the dinner I had prepared. From that day on, our relationship worsened. The fun conversations of the past were gone, and we only communicated on a bare minimum basis. At first, I was sad, but gradually, I began to notice something. My husband is hiding something. If he truly had nothing to hide, there's no need for him to be so flustered. His blatantly cold attitude in the past few days started after I began suspecting him of overtime. If this situation continues, we'll have to have a proper discussion. Just when I was beginning to think about this, a shocking situation arose. One day, when I was thinking about when to have a discussion, he got home from work and casually mentioned,
Oh, by the way, my mom's been hospitalized.
What? Your mom? Why all of a sudden?
Well, because she's sick.
But your mom, she was so energetic. As I hurried to call my mother-in-law.
Wait.
He stopped me. What? I was just about to call your mom. I was briefly taken aback by his loud voice, but I stopped and asked him.
Mom's really weak now. She's probably not up for phone calls, and it seems she's mentally struggling too, so let's hold off.
That bad? Then at least let me visit her.
No, I'll go visit her alone this weekend.
Alone? Why?
Because Mom asked me to.
Your mom asked? According to my husband, apparently my mother-in-law is in such a bad state that it's uncertain whether she'll even be up for visits. She doesn't want to show me her weakened state, so she's requested that only my husband visit her. To be honest, I owe a lot to my in-laws, especially my mother-in-law, who's been treating me like her own daughter ever since our marriage was settled. On top of that, she loves to travel and always brings back souvenirs. The house that we're living in now was given to us by her. Apparently, it was originally inherited from her parents and had been vacant for some time. She gave it to us at the time of our marriage. I have this house that I live in with your father, and it would be a waste if no one lived here, she said, and gave us the house while still retaining the title. She is even still paying the property taxes. I'm worried about my mother-in-law's health, and ideally, I'd like to visit her right away. However, if she prefers only family visits, I should respect her wishes. So, although a bit frustrated, I listened and decided to refrain from visiting her. On Friday night, as scheduled, my husband went to visit my mother-in-law. Her place is only about an hour drive away, but he's planning on staying there until Sunday. Bob was in a good mood that day and seemed a bit giddy.
Sorry about going alone,
he said at the front door as he was leaving. No, it can't be helped. It's what mother-in-law wants.
My mother's condition could take a turn for the worse at any time, so I'll be on standby at my parents' house until then. I think I'll be back on Sunday night.
I see. Her condition is that severe.
Well, just don't call or text her, okay? I don't want her to get upset again.
I understand. I'll go visit her next time, when her body calms down.
Okay, I got it. I'm leaving now.
Yes, take care. It's not that far away, and we could go directly to the hospital from here. I wonder why he needs to stay at his parents' house. But, thanks to that, I can take action. At this time, I sensed that my husband was hiding something, and I planned to investigate while he was away. I might find something if I look at his phone, but he always has his phone on him. So I decided to check his computer that we have at home. After confirming that he had left, I headed to the bedroom where his computer was. I had a good idea of his password, and I was able to get in easily. All right, I need to find something that can serve as a clue. As I was about to open a folder from the desktop, the doorbell rang and I stopped. Who is it? At a time like this, I'm in the middle of an important mission. Still, with my husband away, I have no choice but to respond. I widened my eyes in surprise when I saw the monitor, because the person supposed to be in the hospital, my mother-in-law, was standing there. Mother-in-law? Despite being puzzled by the sight of my energetic mother-in-law on the screen, I opened the front door. Then, mother-in-law said cheerfully, "Long time no see. Mother-in-law, why are you here?" "I came for a surprise today." "A surprise? What are you talking about? Today is your birthday, isn't it, Jessica?" "Ah, now that you mention it. I actually talked it over with Bob first, you know. He told me it'd be a nuisance if I just showed up out of the blue. But I really wanted to celebrate, so I came without telling him." My mother-in-law's words made me realize that today was my birthday. Lately, I've been so preoccupied with my husband that I haven't had any time to think about my own birthday. Amidst all this, my mother-in-law came all the way to celebrate with me. I was simply overjoyed by her consideration. But before that, there was a pressing question that needed to be addressed. Why was my mother-in-law, who was supposed to be in the hospital, here? No matter how I looked at it, she didn't seem seriously ill and appeared to be her usual lively self. I hesitantly asked her, Mother-in-law, are you feeling okay?" "Feeling okay? As you know, Jessica being in good health is my forte." "But you were supposed to be admitted into the hospital." Upon hearing that, my mother-in-law looked surprised and exclaimed, "Admittance to the hospital?" "Bob told me Mom's going to be hospitalized." "I'm going to be hospitalized? What on earth is he talking about?" "And today, he left the house saying he was going to visit you in the hospital." "A visit? But I'm not hospitalized." "Yes, he told me you might take a turn for the worse, so he'll be staying at his parents' house until Sunday." "Jessica, could you wait a minute?" My mother-in-law took out her cell phone and started calling her husband. After a few minutes, she hesitantly began to speak again. "I just asked your father, and it seems Bob isn't coming after all, and no one in the family is hospitalized." So Bob was lying after all. After all, what do you mean? Oh, no, it's just... Jessica, you have to tell me. Under the intense gaze of my mother-in-law, I couldn't bear to hold it in any longer, and confessed everything to her. As we investigated his computer together, we found a photo of him and his mistress inside one of the folders. Perhaps fearing that he would be caught if they used iMessage, there were many records of texts with his mistress saved in his email folder. When his infidelity came to light, I was left speechless by the shock. My mother-in-law also seemed to be trembling slightly, perhaps out of anger. From their email exchanges, it was revealed that today was supposed to be a trip with his mistress. I felt no sadness anymore. I was filled with rage. I couldn't believe he would use his family as an alibi for his infidelity. My mother's hospitalized, gonna pay a visit. Cut the crap. I'll never forgive him for lying so casually for the sake of his affair. Determined to get revenge, I called my husband to confirm his infidelity.
Hello?
Hearing his calm response, I suppressed my anger and asked, Bob, where are you right now?
Huh? I'm visiting Mom at the hospital. Didn't I tell you this morning?
So, you're with mother-in-law right now?
Like I said, yes. Sorry, but I'm in the hospital, so I have to hang up now.
I was convinced my husband was cheating when he straight hung up on me. Now, what should I do? While I was worrying about this, my mother-in-law came up with a great idea. Hey, Jessica, how about moving out? Now that it's come to this. Moving out, you say? This house is under my name. Who lives here and what to do with my house? I have the sole right over this place, not Bob. Mother-in-law? Don't worry. I will always protect you. Thus, as my mother-in-law suggested, I decided to move out. I quickly packed my belongings and ended up staying at my in-laws for the time being. A few days later, I got a call from my husband, who must have just returned from his cheating trip. Hello? Then my husband started grilling me with an incredible intensity.
Hey, Jessica, what's going on here?
What do you mean?
It's the house. Why are your things gone?
Why? Because I moved out.
You moved out? What kind of joke is this?
It's not a joke. Do you know where I am right now? To my perplexed husband, I conveyed the fact. You know where I am. I'm at your parents' home.
Ha! At my parents' home. Why?
Your mother suggested it. She said I'm going to sell that house, so stay here until you find a new one.
Mom? Why?
Yeah, right. In Bob's mind, your mother is in the hospital, isn't she?
So that is...
I told him that my mother-in-law had visited the house, that it was already revealed that my mother-in-law's hospitalization was a lie, and that I already had evidence of his cheating. My husband, realizing that everything's been revealed, started to apologize spontaneously, as if he finally understood the situation he was in.
I'm sorry. I didn't actually have a serious relationship. It was just a fling. Just a fling.
Ha! A fling?
Yes, that's right. The one I love is you, Jessica. I have no intention of getting a divorce, so please, I won't do it anymore, so forgive me.
I'm disgusted with my husband, who easily lines up such convenience phrases. As if to vent all of my resentment, I spat out coldly. Forgive you? Don't be ridiculous. You even lied that your family was hospitalized and cheated on me. Whether it was serious or not doesn't matter. I'm pissed off that you used your mother to cheat on me.
Jessica, I didn't mean to.
Don't make excuses. The fact that you cheated is real. That won't change. I will never forgive you. I'm going to make you pay alimony. If you understand, never contact me again, you scumbag. After hanging up the phone, I set his contact to block caller. Afterward, my husband paid a visit to his parents' house, but my in-laws promptly showed him the door. He was disowned, cut off from his biological parents. After the divorce was finalized, he rented a low-cost apartment, and I hear he's having a tough time making ends meet. Meanwhile, I enlisted a lawyer to sue him and his mistress for emotional distress. With solid evidence at hand, I managed to get them to pay up. Turns out, his mistress was a newbie at their workplace. The whole office was abuzz with their story, leading the mistress to quit from sheer embarrassment. And my husband has been getting the cold shoulder from his co-workers, too. It's only a matter of time before he quits his job. He's flat broke after paying the emotional distress damages, and I wonder how he's going to survive in his already dire financial situation. I doubt there's a bright future waiting for him. Well, it's none of my business anymore. As for me, I recently managed to move into a new place. When I was leaving my in-laws' home, my mother-in-law said this to me. "Jessica, dear, you're welcome to visit us anytime, okay? I truly appreciate everything you've done for me." "It's all right, dear. You're my precious daughter after all." Mother-in-law, thank you. I may have parted ways with my husband, but my relationship with my mother-in-law is still good. I hope to gradually repay my mother-in-law for her kindness.
My name is Grace. I'm a homemaker. I married my husband Scott after a workplace romance. Our marriage life is going smoothly with no complaints, and we get along well every day. I often hear that after marriage, many people struggle with dealing with their spouse's relatives. I especially hear stories about the difficulties of dealing with sisters-in-law. But I got along very well with Scott's sister, Laura, and we often went shopping and traveling. I have a sister of my own, but I don't get along well with Emma, and often thought it would be nice if Laura was my real sister. But then one year, Laura passed away due to illness. The day I received the news of her death, I was so sad that I couldn't eat, and my tears didn't stop until the day of the funeral. And on the day of the funeral, my husband, who had gone to the funeral home before me, suddenly called me. "What's the matter?" When I answered the phone, he was talking fast in a harsh, angry voice. "Do not show up to the funeral. Run to your parents' house. I'll explain the situation later." I arrived at my parents' home, not understanding why I couldn't go to the funeral of my sister-in-law, with whom I had been so close. "What's the matter? Isn't Laura's funeral today?" My parents were surprised by my sudden return with a sad face. I revealed what my husband had told me. "Oh, I see. We just got a call from someone claiming to be Scott's relative. They were complaining that you're a terrible person or something, and even threatened to set our house on fire if we don't pay damages. We had no idea what they were talking about, so we thought it was a scam or harassment. There might be something going on. Let's wait to hear from Scott." Just then my husband, dressed in his morning suit, rushed to our house in his car. Scott bowed deeply and said, "I'm sorry for the unforgivable act committed by my relatives. It seems they haven't arrived here yet. But just in case, let's go to the police." I couldn't comprehend my husband right away, who was gasping for air, so I decided to calm him down and ask for details. "Laura's suicide note was full of accusations against you." "No way." "It's true. It says things like, 'Grace told me to die, and she was violent towards me.' And it asks for revenge. The relatives who took it seriously are trying to extort you with an outrageous amount of damages. This place is also dangerous because they know where it is. Let's go to the police right now," he confessed with a pale face. I collapsed in shock by the front door, but was able to regain my composure with my mother's support. "My sister-in-law said that about me? That's impossible. I've racked my brains, but I have absolutely no memory of doing anything like that." My husband comforted me, rubbing my shoulder, saying, "Calm down, it's okay. It's all lies. Maybe it's my mom who dislikes you and rewrote everything. Your sister-in-law always seemed happy talking about you as if you were her real sister. It can't be true." But I wondered if it's really that easy to fabricate or alter a will. Even I, with my average knowledge of law, understand that if I were to tamper with such personal documents, I'd be immediately held accountable. "Anyway, because they've called, those relatives may be heading here." Rushed by Scott, I left my parents' house. Arriving at the police station, I immediately submitted a recording of the abusive phone call that had been left at my parents' house. In a video from my smartphone showing relatives becoming irate when my mother-in-law abruptly read a suspicious will at the funeral home. The police said that since there was no actual harm yet, they would increase patrols in the neighborhood and wait. Learning that having consulted the police in advance would be beneficial if anything happened in the future, I felt a little relieved. But as soon as I returned to my parents' house, something happened that blew away my relief. As my husband was parking the car and getting out, there was some commotion at the front door. Approaching cautiously, I saw a stranger, a middle-aged man and woman, shouting, "It's your fault! at my sister, whose cheek was red from being slapped. My father's beloved golf club was squashed on the ground, and fragments of broken vases and ornaments were scattered about. Presumably, my husband's relatives had stormed to my parents' house while we were consulting with the police. "Uncle and Aunt, my wife hasn't done anything. I'm calling the police for hurting my wife's sister." As my enraged husband shouted, he called the police. At his words, his uncle and aunt flinched for a second. "Wait, a sister?" They seemed to realize that I, standing next to my husband, was the real Grace, and that the one they had harmed was my sister. But without any signs of remorse, they approached me again with the golf club in hand. "Using a body double? You're a sneaky woman, just like the will said. How dare you bully our beloved little Laura? It's because of you that she suffered mentally and her illness progressed." However, my father, hearing the commotion from the violence towards my sister and the sounds of things breaking, rushed over and grabbed my uncle's hand and shouted at him. "You weren't satisfied with making the impertinent phone call? And now, how dare you lay a hand on my eldest daughter?" I had never seen my father, who normally was gentle, looking so terrifying it made me shudder. My uncle and aunt-in-law seemed unsatisfied and argued with my father for a while, but eventually the police arrived and took them away in their police car for questioning. "Grace, are you okay?" I was dazed by all that had happened, but my father's words brought me back to reality. "I'm sorry, sister, for getting you hurt because of me." I rushed to my injured sister to apologize. My dad, whose energy had vanished just as quickly as it came, was asking my mom to bring an ice pack, looking crestfallen as he said, "I'm sorry I couldn't protect you, especially with your wedding coming up." He tried to ice my sister's cheek with it. My sister grabbed the ice pack from him and, cooling her cheek herself, said, "Huh? It's not your fault. You're quiet and an introvert, but you're a decent person and got along well with my deceased sister-in-law. This is physical damage, right? I can sue that uncle and aunt, so I made some money." That's how my sister always is, cool as a cucumber. But maybe she's just pretending to be calm for my sake, I thought, feeling grateful. And seeing how she stood by me after I got married, believing in me despite the false accusations, made me feel truly reassured. That's why I couldn't forgive my violent uncle and aunt who caused my sister pain, nor myself who had let her get hurt in the first place. That night my husband said to me, "I'll go get evidence. Stay here. Let me know if anything happens," and left me to go to his parents' house. I was anxious while he was gone, but apparently word got around about my uncle and aunt-in-law's unreasonable violence among the relatives, and no one came to my parents' house after that. Later, we arranged a meeting. My parents, my sister, my husband and in-laws, and several relatives, including my uncle and aunt-in-law, gathered at my husband's parents' house. It was a somewhat large house. My uncle and aunt-in-law seemed to understand their positions a bit, but they were still under the delusion that they were right, demanding an apology with absurd logic like, "If you admit to the bullying written in the suicide note, we'll let you off the hook, so we'd like you not to file a report either." Just then, $30,000! My sister, who had been quiet, spoke up. "Oh, what did you say?" When my uncle-in-law glared at her with a sour face, she said, "If you give me $30,000, I will give up on filing a report. I can't concentrate on my work because you hit me so hard. Hand over $30,000 to cover everything, including the golf club and things you broke," she said nonchalantly as she operated her smartphone. My uncle's face turned bright red and he started to yell. "What? You're making a ridiculous claim just because you got punched once. You're brazen. You sisters are the same." In the end, he lashed out at my parents, saying, "Don't you feel pathetic as parents for raising such shameless sisters?" My mother, while calm, responded resolutely. "With all due respect, both sisters are adults. They are expressing their opinions as capable individuals, not as children. Isn't it only natural to respond to rudeness with rudeness? I can't imagine the fear, pain, and indignation of being suddenly punched. Anyway, isn't the suicide note more serious than what happened to me?" my sister asked, this time while yawning. She was seemingly uninterested in the squabbling over her situation. Yes, the cause of all this was the possible tampering with the suicide note, which led my uncle and aunt-in-law and other relatives of my husband to take outrageous actions. "So, does that mean you did it, Mom?" My husband turned to his mother and pressed her. My mother-in-law, who had been fidgeting, flinched very obviously. Well, I'm getting senile and my memory's a bit fuzzy. She tried to gloss over the situation with a simpering tone. Ignoring her, my husband spread out a piece of paper. This is my sister-in-law's real suicide note. My mother had written in her diary of the place she hid it, and I found it. She forged a fake note full of lies that made it seem like my wife bullied my sister, and she read it aloud to our relatives, making them believe it. Who's the fool here? My husband said, suppressing his anger and sounding genuinely disappointed. Mom, you wrote terrible things in your diary, wishing my sister's illness on my wife instead. I can't consider you my mother anymore. With a cold gaze, my husband glared at his own mother. Before his eyes, my mother-in-law eventually became quiet and finally broke into tears. My father-in-law, who had been quietly listening, said, It's my fault for not realizing what kind of person my wife is. Son, you don't have to deal with this family or these relatives anymore. You go live far and happily. I'll keep an eye on my wife and make sure she doesn't see you guys again. That's the least I can do to make amends. My husband nodded at these words and turned to his aunt and uncle who had been silent. Please pay the $30,000 you offered earlier, otherwise we'll take all the evidence and really file a police report. I'd prefer that, but it seems that's not what you want. The aunt and uncle trembled, glaring at my sister. To give $30,000 to such a bratty girl. Yay! I can buy a V-brand bag and a C-brand golf club set. Lucky me! My sister grinned and had a triumphant expression on her face. I didn't like her bad personality, but this time there was more to her happiness. My father had his golf clubs broken, my mother's vase of flowers was broken, and I was involved in unreasonable trouble. It seemed that she was deliberately speaking in an ungraceful manner so that the three of us would feel relieved. Ignoring all of this, my mother-in-law clung to my husband's leg and cried, You're the only one left for me, my dear son. But my husband's heart no longer opened up to her. Then why didn't you care about my sister at all? Her suicide note was switched with a fake one, wasn't it? No, it's not like that. Just listen to me. Enough already. How low can you go? My father-in-law thundered at his wife, who still tried to push her own story. I'm done with this. Let's go, everyone. We'll talk about the money later. Goodbye. My sister quickly stood up, looking down on my mother-in-law. She walked past the bewildered relatives and confidently and gracefully headed towards the entrance. My parents followed her, and my husband took my hand and led me out of the house. I still remember the complicated smile on his face when he said, Even though she's like that now, she used to be a normal mom. When we came home from school, she'd greet us and give us snacks. It's a little sad that we won't be coming back to this house anymore. A week later, I was slowly starting to regain my composure, and I decided to ask my husband about the real will. He said, I was actually waiting until you were smiling again, and spread out the real will before me. I adore you, Grace. I had a hard time with my illness, going in and out of the hospital quite often. I felt that my mother's interest in me was not as strong as her attachment to my brother. My father's affection was always apparent, but you, Grace, being a girl too and close in age, were my true confidant. Because you are my emotional support, I can keep living, no matter how hard it gets. That's something I feel every day. My parents have a considerable fortune, so I want you and Scott to inherit all of my estate. If it goes to my mother, she would just blow through it quickly. I know my father would understand. I hope it can contribute to your happiness. I couldn't help but hug the will and cry. Go ahead and cry your heart out today, my husband said as he put his arms around my shoulder to calm me down. From that day on, I decided to smile and live my life for my sister-in-law. I will carefully save her inheritance until the day I really need it. Later, my sister settled matters with my husband's aunt and uncle for $30,000. She immediately bought things and sent them a list of the items in a letter titled, A Thank You Note for the $30,000. It's a very Emma-like approach, but maybe that's not enough to clear the grudge from the pain of being punched in earnest. As a side note, my relationship with my sister improved a little after this incident, and she started inviting me to go out for meals together. Meanwhile, my mother-in-law became emotionally unstable and aged rapidly. Her paranoia got worse, and she mistook a stranger for me, yelling, "It's your fault Scott left," which led to police involvement. Though she was a first-time offender and her mental state was taken into consideration, resulting in a suspended sentence, she became widely known as a dangerous person. My father-in-law, true to his promise, did not abandon her and continued to take care of her without letting her come to our place. My husband and I, having cut ties with his relatives, are now living a peaceful life. Looking back, it was a seriously terrifying experience. I feel sorry for my father-in-law, who didn't know anything about it, but I still can't forgive my mother-in-law for trampling on her own daughter's feelings. My husband and I will slowly walk along this long road ahead of us together, for my sister-in-law who longed for our happiness.
This is the tender story of how my niece and I, who are not blood related, became a true family. My name is Marie, and I'm a 35-year-old housewife. Sean and I met in college and started dating shortly thereafter. After college, I entered the workforce and we got married right before I turned 30. We have one son, Ryder, who had just turned 2 years old. He didn't talk much yet, but he was very curious and into everything. He even started walking before he ever crawled. Sean and I started discussing having a second child. We knew having another baby could be harder this time since we were getting older. My husband is the middle child of 3. He has an older brother, Sam, and younger sister, each 3 years apart from him, who were also married. My brother-in-law and his wife, Linda, had also been trying to get pregnant for a year now. Linda was older than Sam. She had always worked hard to take care of herself and looked very young for her age. She had the mindset that since she looked so great for her age and she felt even younger, so she would eventually be able to get pregnant. However, when she finally turned 40 that year, she became impatient and finally started fertility treatment. I have friends the same age as Linda who were also struggling with fertility treatments. Given that, I was worried about Sam and Linda, who started much later in life. But they had some money saved up, made some good investing decisions, and Sam was a very health-conscious person. He ate organic foods and they belonged to a fancy yoga studio, so I thought their lifestyle would be an advantage for them. All my husband and I could do was to support them. Meanwhile, Sean's younger sister Sue and her husband Richard had a 5-year-old daughter, Layla. Layla's father did his best to play with her, and her mother was gentle but firm when necessary. My niece had grown up to be a wonderful little girl with a bright smile and a lovely personality. She would say, "When I grow up, I'm going to marry my father." She often spoke about the dreams of all the fathers in the world, and she made her dad proud. Layla also loves my son, her cousin Ryder. When we get together, my son exclaims, "My Layla, my Layla," and he would run up to my niece and be very attached to her. My sister-in-law and her husband were an ideal family, the picture of happiness. But misfortune struck suddenly and without warning. One day, they died most suddenly. They were the victims of a one-sided accident through no fault of their own. The day of the funeral, both sets of their parents sobbed as they clung to the coffins. My niece Layla stood holding hands with my stunned husband. I also found it impossible to stop crying, but their grief was immeasurable. I felt so sorry for my niece, who was staring at the 2 pictures of her deceased parents, not speaking. Tears silently streamed down her cheeks. I wondered if her small mind and body would be able to cope with this level of trauma. As I thought of my Layla's future without her parents, I cried even harder. We had to make sure she had a stable home. My mother-in-law was the only one who stayed at home and was currently undergoing treatment for an illness that kept her in and out of the hospital. Both of Layla's paternal grandparents were disabled and unable to care for anyone else. Layla's uncle, her father's brother, was single and traveled a lot for work. And we had a young son who was still a full-time job. We were not in a situation to be able to devote ourselves to our niece's emotional care. I guess the decision was made in consideration of these circumstances. After the seventh-day memorial service, my mother-in-law stepped aside with Sam and Linda and asked if they could talk privately, but we were also in the same room. "I want you to take Layla with you." My brother-in-law, Sam, who adored my niece, seemed inclined to accept it, but however, his wife, Linda, suddenly bared her emotions. "What do you mean? You want us to take her when we are trying to have our own child?" My sister-in-law had never expressed this kind of intensity to any of us. My mother-in-law flinched. Well, it's not like that, but you're going to be 40, right? I can't keep paying for your fertility treatment. Layla is a very good girl. That's why. This is a terrible thing to ask. You said you would support us, but now you are breaking your promise, she ranted, her eyes bloodshot. My sister-in-law, who was always dressed nicely and sat with a twinkle in her eye, was a mere memory. I could not hide my surprise at the fact that my mother-in-law was paying for her fertility treatment. I thought they both were working and earning money. How could they ask my mother-in-law to support them? Where is she spending her money? No, you see, my mother-in-law tried her best to ease the tension, but the damage had already been done. My sister-in-law erupted like an active volcano. I don't want someone else's child, much less the child of a couple who didn't have an education or good jobs. I want a child of my own blood, a good child. The room fell silent. Hey, Sam shouted as he hurriedly pulled her arm to restrain her outburst, but she refused to back down and glared daggers at my mother-in-law. She seemed so selfish in that moment. It was all too much. I was filled with rage at her words and actions. Layla was sitting still, staring blankly at the pictures of her parents. Although I could not see her face from behind, she must have known, even at a young age, that she was being treated like an intruder and that her parents were being vilified. I didn't want this child to have to carry anything more on her tiny shoulders. It would be unthinkable to entrust my child to such a heartless woman. There was only one way to protect Layla. I made up my mind. We will take Layla. Marie! My mother-in-law looked at me in surprise. My husband also looked anxious at my decision. I agree, but I'm also worried it's you who will have the hardest time with another child at home. I understand, but I won't give up. I looked into his eyes earnestly. Thank you. Thank you so much. My mother-in-law bowed to me repeatedly as if she were about to drop to her knees. I won't be made to sit here and look like the bad guy. Let's go home. Linda continued to glare at us while grabbing Sam's arm and quickly headed for the door. Sam glanced at us sullenly and followed her out without a word. I sat down next to Layla and said in the kindest voice I could, Come to our house. We want you to live with us. She replied quietly, I don't want to be a bother. No, it's not like that. We want you to come. My chest tightened at the sight of this small child who knew her place. At that moment, my son, who was playing with a toy car in the corner of the room, walked up to me. My Layla! My Layla! My son took Layla's hand. They loved each other so much. Ryder, Layla is going to be your big sister from now on. Layla, really? Are you my sister? Yes. Big sister. My son nodded his head, clearly wondering what big sister meant. But we could tell that he understood that big sister was a very nice thing. My big sissy Layla. Ryder squeezed Layla tightly, and the joy resonated in the room. My brother. Layla looked up at my husband and me with confusion. Nice to meet you, big sister Layla. I beamed at her, and her face crumpled into a joyful cry. Then she hugged my son's body and sobbed, her little shoulders shaking. I held back tears myself and decided right then and there that I would protect this little girl for the rest of her life. From that day on, Layla was part of our family. She was a very good girl. She worked hard, did well in kindergarten, and even helped out at home. But she didn't smile much, and it was painful to see her have to fight so hard through her grief to find a new place in this world. The trauma and grief of her loss would manifest in sudden night terrors, crying, and potty accidents in the middle of the night. As I stroked her little back as she cried in the dark, wondering if I could ever help get her to a place of healing. It was during times like this that Ryder would often come to our rescue. He would say, "Layla, sissy, let's play," and followed Layla all around the house. He showed his love to her, and always seeking Layla's tenderness, he seems to fill a void for her that no one else could. At first, she just obediently played with him, but little by little, they settled into a true sister-brother bond, arguing over toys and sternly correcting him when he misbehaved. As parents, we felt spoiled by this sweet little girl. She was always thinking of others and willing to help out. She was never selfish. "Could we have curry for dinner?" she would ask. It was a small request, but I was happy to hear her express her needs and preferences. Sean and I raised Layla like our own, and my mother-in-law supported us as much as she could. Finally, 2 years after Layla came to live with us, I started thinking about getting pregnant again. Of course, I was worried. What would another baby do to Layla's progress and healing? I was very worried. But if I gave up on another pregnancy only because of Layla, that wouldn't be right either. No matter which path I chose, I was sure I would have regrets and difficulties. Then I realized that we only have one life, and I wanted to live a life with no regrets. My husband and I decided to start trying, and we became pregnant. Finally, after several weeks of anxiety, once I felt it was safe to reveal, I told Layla, "We're going to have another baby, big sister Layla." Her eyes widened momentarily, surprised at my words. Then, after a brief pause, she smiled and happily snuggled into my belly. I loved the way she looked at me, and as I stroked Layla's head, we both thought of baby names. One day, without warning, my sister-in-law Linda showed up at our house. It felt like the arrival of a curse. She barged through the door and slammed it. Then she took one look at my growing belly and blatantly scowled. "Oh no, you really are pregnant." My mother-in-law had probably told her about my pregnancy. I wondered if she had come all the way here just to confirm it. "How can you take in a child who's not related to you and then have another baby? You have no common sense. I feel sorry for all these children you're raising." The way she just showed up to pick a fight with me made me so angry. What did she know about our family when she hadn't had any contact with us for the past 2 years? "We are happy. We want this baby." "Oh, no, you can't do that. It's harder than you think raising 3 kids, not to mention one that's not even yours." "This is our life. Why are you here?" "I'll take your baby." "What?" I had no idea what she was talking about. A few minutes ago, she was ranting about how children were so much trouble. "I can't continue with fertility treatments anymore, so I'll take your child." What? What is this person saying? I began to shake with anger. "There is no way I would give him to you. Don't act like you are offering to do me a favor." "Oh, no. Is it a boy again? You're so bad at this. Boys are so violent. I'd rather have a girl." "What?" "Then it can't be helped. That girl, Layla, right? I'll take her instead." I was astonished. First, the thought of insulting me, my parenting, and my pregnancy. Then, demanding this child after refusing to take her in 2 years ago. Now, after all this time, you want to take Layla back. Absolutely not. You're crazy. She belongs with us. That child has gone through so much, and we are her home now. We took Layla in, and she's not a possession to be passed around. We are responsible for raising her to the end. I refused. What, you're going to act like her mother after raising her for only 2 years? I won't just hand her off to someone who mocks the 2 years she suffered and thinks of her as if she were an object. You have 3 children. Don't be greedy and give me one. Why would I give her to you? She was irritated and stomped her feet in frustration, as if she had expected me to just hand her over willingly. At that moment, the doorbell rang. At the same time, a man's voice comes from the other side of the door. It's her husband, my brother-in-law, Sam. Hey, you're here, aren't you? Ah, give me a break. Sam opened the door with great force. Suddenly, Linda's face turned pale, and she bolted out the door. Sam narrowly managed to avoid colliding with her, and he said suddenly to me, I'm sorry, I'll tell you what happened later. He then took off after her. I sat down on the spot as if the tension in my body had just been broken. Layla and Ryder, who had been hiding in the living room, approached me fearfully. Kids, listen. Mom, Layla isn't going anywhere, is she? She's my big sister. She always will be, right? My son looked up at me anxiously. Of course, Layla is our family. I patted their heads, and Layla opened her mouth to speak. Am I allowed to stay here? The same question as 2 years ago. At that time, to be honest, a large part of me took her in out of pity. But now, she is my daughter. She completed a part of our family we didn't even know was missing. I want you to stay here forever. I spoke to her from the bottom of my heart. Layla, who looked like she was about to cry, responded with her best smile. Yeah. I gathered both children into my arms and squeezed them joyfully. The touch of my children in my arms warmed my heart, and I could feel my son in my belly moving happily. A few days after Linda's visit, Sam and my mother-in-law came to apologize for her behavior, and then shared a shocking secret. Linda had been having an affair. Apparently, she had been trying for over a year to have a baby with a married man in her office who already had a child, because she was exhausted with fertility treatments and their lack of results. She chose this man not only because she liked his face, but also because he had a seemingly successful track record of having children. However, her plan backfired. Sam found out about the affair, had filed for divorce, and demanded alimony. She wanted to escape both alimony and divorce, and she thought that as long as she had a child somehow, some way, she could absolve herself. It's ridiculous and appalling, but it seems that she was in a panic and couldn't think straight. However, she was determined. It was during the confrontation between her and her husband that she fled to our home, demanding what she thought would be a quick fix. I could not believe she thought such a backwards demand would fix her situation. There was a time in our lives when I thought Linda was a more thoughtful person. How shallow and selfish. I am so glad there was no chance of Layla going with her. Naturally, Sam and Linda divorced. Linda was charged with alimony not only by Sam, but also the wife of the man with whom she had had an affair, and she was accused of cheating within her company, which made her a pariah at work. She's already in her mid-40s. She will have to continue to pay back the alimony alone for the rest of her miserable life. On the other hand, we decided to legally adopt Layla as a result of this incident. I was worried that it would feel like we were taking her from her real parents, but since they had died, I wanted to be able to protect her at all costs and keep her with us legally, forever. But most of all, I wanted to be Layla's legal mother. Eventually, Layla herself started referring to her late mother as Mom, and me as Mama. We slowly grew our relationship to become like a real mother and daughter. Today is my daughter Layla's coming-of-age ceremony. On this once-in-a-lifetime occasion, she asked me to wear my special red long-sleeved kimono. I suggested that she rent a modern kimono, but she said without hesitation, "Mama, I want to wear your kimono." She was adamant. My daughter dressed up in my kimono by arranging it prettily with accessories in a modern style. On the way to the venue of the ceremony with Layla, we were approached by a stranger who was on a walk. "Ah, it must be your coming-of-age ceremony. You're so beautiful, and you look just like your mother." We looked at each other and laughed. I don't know how many times I've been told that Layla looks and behaves just like me since she started high school. It is strange, isn't it? Though we're not related by blood. When I said this, Layla shook her head. "It's only natural that we look alike. My mama praised me, disciplined me, fed me, and loved me. This body of mine is made with a lot of love for my mama and dad. Oh, Layla. When I lost my real mom and dad as a young child, it was really painful. There were times when I resented them, wishing they had taken me with them. But now I'm glad to be alive, glad to be an adult, from the bottom of my heart. Thank you, Mama, for bringing me into this family. Thank you for being my mama. Tears and various emotions welled up in my heart as my daughter smiled beautifully at me saying these words. Thank you for being my daughter. Oh no, don't cry, Mother, because I've been on the road since 5 a.m. and I've had my makeup professionally done. My teary-eyed daughter laughed in astonishment and held out a handkerchief to me. It has been a beautiful 15 years. There were days when we butted heads, didn't agree, and had heated arguments, but that's a natural part of being a parent and child. This year, Layla will graduate from a vocational school and enter the workforce. A parent's job is to make sure that a child grows up to be an adult who no longer needs them. And I have done my job. It is bittersweet, though, because Layla's presence has made my life better. Mama, even though I'm grown, I will still need you. Always. Of course, you are my precious daughter. Regardless of how we came to be a family, we will always be just that. Family.